Look at the forward tilt of the head, the ultra-strong eye contact, and the jerky, sudden movements.
You think enlightenment feels good? It doesn't. Because who is there to feel? That experience of enlightenment has no feeling because there's no you to feel anything.
This is the no-self trap, one of the most corrosive, hyper-intellectual dead ends in modern spirituality. Today we're going to break down how the ego co-opts a glimpse of awakening in order to build the ultimate, impenetrable psychological fortress. So now I want you to think about the most special moments that you can experience as a human. For example, a mother holding her newborn baby for the first time. Pure wonder and delight. But according to this video, not real, feel nothing. Sitting by your father's bedside, holding his hand as he takes his last breath. Not real, feel nothing. Looking into your partner's eyes on your wedding day and seeing the tears as you promise to spend the rest of your life together. Not real, feel nothing. This isn't awakening. This is cold, sad, angry detachment. This is the ego distorting realization and weaponizing it as a shield. If I don't exist, nothing can hurt me. And it takes this numbness inside and turns it into a badge of honor. I don't feel anything, therefore I'm enlightened. And this actually has two distinct parts. There's a part that is, there's no me, the world doesn't exist, we're all dream characters. But then there's also a second part that's a little bit less explicit, but that's saying, I get it, I see the truth, and you need to agree with me. So let's look at the other side of this.
I experienced the beginning of creation, and all that was left was consciousness. When this happened, I didn't need to go anywhere. I just went back in time within my own experience.
So notice the complete reversal here. You know, when it's about having an amazing mystical experience, suddenly I had an experience. I went back into myself and I'm going to tell you about it. So the ego is playing a double game here. In the first clip, he's using no self to invalidate your existence. And this is actually an abusive power dynamic. Anyone who complains or has an emotion or says that they actually do exist isn't enlightened. So what it means is the only way to actually exist for them is to deny your own existence and agree with them. But in the second clip, this whole defense just turns off. Because if there's no him, then there's no way for him to be special. The ego just can't resist saying, look what I saw, I'm going to tell you about it. And this is like the childhood equivalent of, you know, all of the children are playing, but one of them is sitting on the edge watching, like this. Ugh, children, having fun, disgusting, I wouldn't want to be involved in that. But a minute later, they come up with the game where they're the center of attention and suddenly they want to be involved. So the reason I know about this trap is that I actually fell into it. When I first had my awakening, I realized who I was, but I came back into a body that was carrying a lot of repressed pain, anger, rage, sadness, and fear. And by retreating into a kind of watching perspective, I could see very clearly what was happening. But the thing that I couldn't see, that I wasn't aware of at the time, was I couldn't really see what was happening in me very much. I could see other people's illusions, but I wasn't so good at seeing my own illusions. And it took a lot of time and pain and humility and patience from other people and being able to accept their help to actually be able to start to come through this. And I needed people that loved me to call me out on my bullshit. And I also needed some amount of humility to be able to take that on board and see myself clearly. So how do we get out of this trap? Well, fundamentally, it's not going to be possible if you stay in the realm of the intellect. People who promote this will tell you that it's real, but actually, if we're brutally honest about it, it's just a whole load of beliefs and convictions. There is a me, there isn't a me. These are just thoughts, nothing more. So to get out of this, we need to drop out of the head and into the body. The body is naturally present, it's naturally feeling, and it's naturally real. This no-self game can't survive being grounded in the emotion or being grounded in the somatic sense. And ironically, if you ever talk to one of these people, just ask them how they feel, and they'll immediately evade. So this is an inquiry that you can do to start stripping away the layers and getting closer to yourself. And you can do this by yourself, but it's often better to try and do it with a partner. It just makes it easier. So this inquiry has 3 parts. What are you feeling right now? This could be anything. It could be a thought is happening, it could be a feeling in the body, or it could be more like a sensation, like I'm feeling tension in my arm. So then the next question is, how close are you to that? How touched are you by that? So we tend to be able to experience things that seem quite distant or seem very close. And actually, we have an intuitive sense of that. And this isn't about getting it right. If someone says, how close do you feel, and you're not sure, just think of the first number that comes into your head. It doesn't really matter. And so if you feel very close and very touched to this feeling, then that's great. And your partner asks you again, well, what do you feel now? But if you feel like it's more difficult, if you feel very untouched or very distant from it, then they could ask you the question, so what's difficult about that? And this will start to reveal what's preventing you from getting close to that feeling. So now imagine my partner asks me what I'm feeling. And I say, I'm feeling tension in my arm. And they say, how touched are you by the tension? Well, it feels quite distant. And they say, what's difficult about feeling tension? And I say, it's frustrating. I don't want to feel it. And they say, okay, so how close are you to the frustration? And I say, yeah, not very close. And they say, so what's difficult about feeling frustrated? And I could say, it feels kind of itchy and annoying and I don't like it. And then they could say, so what happens when you're feeling something that you don't like? And you say, well, it makes me feel angry. And they say, is it okay to feel angry? And I say, well, it's okay, but I feel like I can't express it properly. And then they could say, well, how is it to notice that? And I say, well, actually, when I notice that, I feel a little bit of relief because I was able to express myself. So when we started off, it sounded like the problem was the tension. But by moving through a few layers of this, we find out actually there's a problem with expressing feeling. And when an expression happens, there's a kind of relaxation, the energy could move. And this makes the entire thing easier and lighter. And this is a way that we get closer to ourselves, but also to work on our identity on both the intellectual and the embodied somatic levels. What you'll find is if you only ever work at the intellectual level, you won't actually ever find satisfaction. It's like when you pick up a big stone, sometimes you lift it up, and underneath you find all of these bugs living in there. And it's a bit like that when we have an intellectual problem or difficulty. Often underneath, there are a whole load of somatic and emotional difficulties hiding in there. Unless we address those, even if apparently we solve the problem, it still doesn't result in peace. So spiritual awakening isn't just a one-way journey into the void. As we submit our energy to our attention, and our attention returns back to source, we take the back step, and we realize our eternal, empty, essential nature. But the second part is less common, and this is where infinite consciousness submits itself to live a human condition and be touched. To feel all of the human emotions, joy, sadness, love, with no distance. This is the core of non-duality. Emptiness knows itself as form, and form knows itself as emptiness. And the fact is, if we only do the first part of this journey, it becomes very individualistic. It's all about my realization, my enlightenment. What claims to be no self is in fact very self-centered. The mantra is, I'm all that matters, and don't disturb my unconditional peace. So the more that we can see this, also the more that we can start to be human together, to recognize our own blind spots and our own weaknesses, and help each other create an awakening that's shared. It's less about my enlightenment and more about our shared interest to explore reality together. So if you made it this far, thank you so much for watching, and let me know your thoughts. I'd love to read them, and see you next time.